You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do. Hello, people-centric leaders. So I don't even remember where I was or how I heard the phrase, but I heard this phrase the other day and it immediately made me think of lots of different people. And the phrase is emotional contagion.
Ouch.
And I loved it. I loved it because I was like, oh my gosh, that hit so hard because emotions are contagious, right? When my husband's in a grumpy mood, it makes me grumpy. It's pretty rare, but
Oh,
usually
that guy's the worst. He's the worst.
Usually the other way around. I'm grumpy and then it makes him grumpy. But then I also thought about our teammate Philip, who is just like this wonderful positive ray of sunshine, like 98% of the time. And I was like, man, he's an emotional contagion because he makes everyone around him just feel better most of the time. And so I was like, it's really interesting to me that phrase just sort of set off a whole thing in me. And I was like, yes, I know these people and I know how that happens. And I understand that emotions are contagious. So I thought that we should talk a little about that today. What do you think?
You want to talk about how Jimmy's an emotional contagion specifically?
Jimmy and Philip, those were the two.
Oh, the two. And one is the good one and one's the bad one. Is that what you're
No,
going to do?
Jimmy was also the positive one in my mind. And if I'm being honest, my emotional contagion showed up too. And I was like, oh, I should watch it more. I should pay more attention.
I know what's it. Well, Diana, and this is Diana, and this is Dawn. We like people tell us like we don't say our names all the time, and Stephanie's on too here. Stephanie, say something.
Something.
Good job.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I was like, okay, but how does this fall if I'm the trendsetter and I'm leading the charge? Should everyone just, if I'm mad, it's like the kind of like if mom ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. But like, what if I'm mama? And what if I am leading the charge here? And what if everyone should be mad at the things that I'm mad about, Diana? Or what if everyone should be happy about the things that I'm happy about? Can you positively
contaminate? Can we
Can I contaminate people the way can I continue contaminating the way that I want to? Thanks.
Can we infect others can we manipulatively infect others?
I think a contagion, I like the word contagion because it means you can't not impact others, is what's kind of cool about that concept. So if you're coming into work in a really bad mood, everybody's going to run with that bad mood. Like you're going to impact. You can't, we like to say you can't not lead. You can't turn that off. You can't say, don't follow me right now. I'm just really pissed off and I don't like this idea. Especially if you have a position of authority and people are really looking to you to say like, are we going this way? And you're sitting there pouting or upset about something. Or on the flip side, I like what you said, it's also contagious if you're happy and excited about it, then that other people can get excited about that too. So yeah, I'm curious. What do you both think when you think of contagious? Like when is it contagious and when is it not contagious? Because emotions don't always translate to other people, right? Sometimes people get that, like, why are you pouting off in the corner while the rest of us are having a good time? Like, when does it work and not work? I'm curious what what you think about that.
I mean, I'm going to make a case for even in that scenario, it is. Because even if you don't agree with the person, so let's say, yes, someone on the team is really like pouting. And they are throwing themselves a pity party. They're mad. They're over in the corner about it. Even if you decide to actively say, like, I'm not going to go that way, I'm not going to allow like that to infect our team, it's still impacting the team because now we all have to work around that person's emotions and mood all day long, which means I might have to change how I do things today or which meetings we're having or not having and who gets included in what. And I have to expend a lot of mental effort to consider that person is over there doing this. So even though, like, I agree with what you're saying, and I think that's where our brains trick us a little bit, that we're like, I'm not falling into their trap, I'm not doing this and that. But what did you talk about when you got home to the person in your life? you probably were like, oh, so annoying today. This person did this person did that. And then you talk about how that made your day hard. You don't not mention it, right? Now, if you do, then you have a steelier brain trap than I do to not let those things affect you. But I don't know. I actually don't know that you really can. I think you can ignore things to a point, but there's a piece of like out of sight, out of mind that's only partially true. And then I think there's also like some toxic positivity that can come along with that. You're like, I'm just going to ignore everything. Then are you the person that's just like putting your fingers in your ears and going like, la, 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 la. And I don't know. So there's my counterpoint to that.
Well, and I do think if we're using the term contagion and thinking about like this person is going to infect us, there are things you can do to like prevent that. You can use extra hand sanitizer and put on a mask and stay 6 feet away and do all the things. But if you aren't careful enough, you're going to get infected. It's going to happen. And then I think you're also like constantly worried about it, right? I'm like, oh my God, I got to go wash my hands again. Or did this person touch that? Or, oh man, they're coughing. Should I back up a little bit more? So to Stephanie's point, maybe it's always still kind of infectious, even if you're doing everything you can to prevent it.
Yeah. And I would say I think we're uniquely positioned as consultants sometimes to observe this, because I would say, like, if you asked me about that for me personally, like outside of the context of our work, I'd be like, oh yeah, I can successfully ignore things. I can compartmentalize. I can do that. But then I'm like, I kind of know this is not true because of like, again, how steely my brain is. It's because we observe it for other people, and we will talk to leaders or teams, and they're like, yes, we're working on this, but then they end up talking about one person all the time, that even if they're like, well, we've isolated that problem, they're still being impacted by that problem. Either they're still talking about that person all the time, or now they're having to create different systems and processes and habits to try to avoid that person and those feelings and those type of things. Like, they're actually still expending quite a bit of effort to do that. And sometimes we have to be the ones to say, like, hey, I'm just going to point out the elephant in the room that, like, you've not really effectively isolated that. Like, it is really impacting either the team, the company, or like you, like personally. It is impacting you because, to our point, like, it is a contagion. You can't completely escape it. To your point, Diana, yes, there are things you can do, I think, that help. But you probably can't completely escape it. You've kind of got to face it.
I've never thought about like life on a team with we talk about toxic people, and just to kind of review that a little bit. A toxic person, which we use that strong language, not because we're trying to judge the person harshly. Like, everybody listening to this has probably been toxic in their job at some point. And a lot of you listening to this are toxic right now. And you're like, well, I'm not a toxic person. It's like, you might not be a toxic human being, but if you're misaligned with the company that you work for and you're actively pushing against it, even if you think you're right, even if you are right, you fall into the category of being toxic and you're pushing back. And I've never thought of like life with a toxic person being like life under COVID, right? Like, it was like you didn't even have to catch COVID to feel the impact of the pandemic. Like, I got it late. Like, I got COVID late in that whole process. But my life was very impacted for the 6 months before I didn't, until I got it. Because you're like Diana said, you're tiptoeing around it. Like, you have to be careful where you go, and there's some anxiety about it. What if I run into it? Do I put on a mask here? Do I protect myself? How do I do that? And that is life. If you talk to managers, and if you're a manager listening to this and you have somebody on your team that you would define as being toxic, it's who are you thinking about when you're driving to work? And even if that person doesn't end up saying anything or doing anything bad in the meeting or in the discussion that you're about to have, you're thinking about, how do I work around that person? Like Stephanie said, how do I make sure I manage around that? So yeah, it's a fun way of thinking about it, or not fun way of thinking about it, but it shows the impact. It's a massive impact, whether or not that toxic person is even impacting everybody in the moment or not. Just the fact that they might someday puts everybody on edge. So it makes me wonder, like, if you're a leader on a team and you're sitting there, first of all, I mean, I think it's the first takeaway from this is to realize that you're always leading other people. So watch yourself, check yourself, right? Watch your emotional intelligence, right? We just did an episode on that, to check your emotional intelligence. Make sure you're aware of how you're feeling and how you come across to others so that you have a chance at managing that. But then the next question, I guess, would be, now if you're on the flip side of that and there's somebody else on your team that is contagious the wrong direction, how do you can you out contagious them? Can you come in hyper positive and overcome the negative and counteract those two things and explode in an explosion of matter and antimatter, creating a void inside of a team that creates a black hole?
And that is a strong analogy there, sir. I don't.
Is that how the science works?
I don't know.
Check that part, people.
Sorry, the engineer in me got a little carried away there. I'm sorry. I should have thought about 10 seconds ago.
I don't think that you can do that. I don't think you can come in and just sort of like out positivity it, right? I think that's probably the wrong route. Sort of just like, you can't, if you're sick, you can't just like say you're not sick anymore. But what you can do is you can take meds, you can have a humidifier, right? So I think that is what we're saying you can go do. You can go in and say, what's up with you? Like, have a conversation. You can tell them that their emotions are bleeding through to everyone else and people are noticing, right? I think it's, you make them more aware, you ask them what's going on, you get them to talk about things, you get them to share a little bit more, and then the burden is lifted and their emotions can go a different direction.
Yeah. So you just laid out like 3 strategies, like bam, 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 that you could do. So like if I'm working with somebody who's super negative, strategy number 1 is like out positive the negative. And I have totally seen leaders try to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It does. The contrast between the two things feels weird to the team. The team knows that something weird's going on, and it makes both sides look weird in my experience. Like you're ignoring what's happening over there, and you're ignoring what's happening over there, and you're both being weirdly overly on 2 different sides of things. So that's one thing. The second response might be one where you're less aware of, where the person comes in toxic and you join them. You get contagious. Like you get sick, you get infected, and then you're mad too. And now everybody's mad and you have a bad attitude, and the attitude spreads through the rest of the team, and then everybody's got it. That's the second kind of an approach to it, which is more of a laissez-faire sort of approach. Like you just get sick. Like I didn't even know there was a sickness out there. I'm not protecting myself. I'm not trying to take meds. I'm not wearing a mask. I'm not doing anything like that. So I just get sick. But the third approach that you just laid out is more of like a reflective approach, right? You're just you're pointing out to the person who's contagious that they're being contagious and how it's impacting the team. You're not trying to dive into it yourself. You don't have to, you can manage your own emotions while you do that. So I mean, let's dive into that conversation. What's that look like? Like, do you go up to the person and say, why are you the way you are? What's wrong with you? Yeah. How dare you? What's the question you ask?
That's how you did it with me. So I don't know.
Diana, later. We'll talk about this later.
You brought me a rock that said, suck on this. That's an Office reference, for the record. That's an Office reference. Yeah, I think it's hard to go in and tell someone that they're being a turd. Like, it's hard to be like, hey, you're not being cool right now. That's a tough conversation to have. But if you go in and say, hey, I've noticed that you're not yourself lately, that's a good spin on it, right? I've noticed that something is up. What's going on with you? And you might even point out some examples. In this meeting, you were really down on this thing and you haven't joined on the happy hours or whatever it is. Just show them that they're not being their normal selves and ask them what's wrong. And I think that opens up a lot of things to just be said. And sometimes that's all people need, is someone to have noticed.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. I do kind of want to point out maybe one common pitfall that I think we see people do a lot in this conversation. It's because as a leader, their negativity, that contagion, is very obvious to you. And because it's obvious to you, you have a different perspective, right? And I think a lot of times people will go into that conversation and start it the way that you did, Diana, which I agree is the right way to start that, is don't just come in hot and tell them what's wrong with them, but ask them, like, I'm noticing a difference in you, what that. But then what I've seen a lot of leaders do is then when that person then explains what's wrong with them and they tell you what they think you've done wrong or somebody else has done wrong, they're pointing out all these injustices. It may even sound to you like they're making a lot of excuses for their behavior. They're pointing blame at other people. I think the mistake I hear people make a lot is then they go, well, I don't see it that way. And then they go into their own rant about why this person is wrong.
They got infected.
And they didn't realize that they got infected in the course of that conversation. Because when you do that, what effectively happens is, number one, you just told this person they should not feel the way that they feel, which no one likes being told how to feel. And actually, it's a super ineffective way to get someone to change how they feel about something, is just throw all of the facts at them about why they are wrong, right? But then you caught the contagion and you might have just convinced that toxic person to actually stay and remain toxic, right? And I've seen leaders kind of make that mistake multiple times because they don't realize that they've caught the contagion in the meeting because they didn't actually prepare for this conversation. They didn't put on some extra hand sanitizer or take their vitamins or do those things to use that analogy that we're using. They didn't really prepare to not be infected. They just went into the conversation and were like, you're contagious, and then caught it, because then they're going to just dispute every point that this person has said and tell them why they're wrong. And usually, again, what happens is if you're effective in disputing their claims, you didn't actually change how they feel about that, but you did convince them to stay.
Yeah.
And that's not always the right thing to do, to convince your toxic person to stay.
It's true. But I also I've seen people at the end of that conversation say, I'm so sorry. I hate that you're feeling this way. What can we do about it?
Yes.
And that, to me, I'm like, there you go. I'm so sorry. What can we do? And maybe the answer is you can't really do anything. But since you asked the question and you're trying to make something better, I think people notice that, and that emotional contagion starts to wane. Some of that goes away a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because I think, probably the response to what I just said is well, then what do you do instead? And I think you ask more questions. And it's I love the question of if somebody then takes that opportunity to air all their grievances, to tell you everything that's wrong, sometimes you just need to look at them and say okay, if that is how you feel, then what do you want to do about it? What do you want to do with that? What outcome would then feel right to you? And then you can sometimes that helps people recognize oh yeah, I do actually have a role in this contagion. I could change something about what I'm doing. Or you might get them to vocalize that maybe there's nothing you could do that would change their thoughts or feelings or opinions. Maybe the injustice for them is too deep. The pain is too deep. And that maybe they need to make a change, because you're not going to completely upend your company and your culture and your whole team and how you do everything to cure the contagion for them. So I think it's good to just ask that question of what do you want to do with that? What do you want to do about that? What do you see that we could change that would still support our team, support our goals as a company, but help make this better?
Yeah, the problem isn't the person. The problem is the impact the person is having on everybody, right? The problem isn't, we don't just hate all viruses, right? Or people. We hate the impact that it has. We hate that it makes people sick. And if a person's making your team sick, there's really only three outcomes that are positive. And one of them is to get the person to stop being contagious, which means reflecting to them the impact they're having on the team. I think that's the piece that people don't realize. We've all, when we're toxic, and I can go back in my career, and I have had to have lots and lots of souls, because we talk about this so much. I can point to so many moments where I am embarrassed at how I showed up in front of a team, because I've had to think about this so much. And what I had to replay what was going on in my head. And my head was focused on some injustice or something that made me upset, not on the other people in the room at the moment. I like to say we're at our worst when we know we're right. I knew I was right about something, and I forgot that the rest of the team was watching me and following me in that moment. It is really an epiphany for a lot of people who are in that situation to say, the core issue isn't whether you're right or wrong on this. It's how you're impacting the rest of the team. It's the fact that you're being contagious. So then the three possible outcomes for that person, if you're a manager, you can absolutely, you can drive into one of these three solutions. Is either one is they change their behavior so that they recognize that they can be a more positive impact on the rest of the team, or they decide to leave, or you decide to make them leave. Like that, those are the only three outcomes that are positive on that. And I like what you said, Stephanie. A lot of times we think, well, I really, as a manager or a team member, I want to fix that person. I want to help them. But you can't without their permission. They have to see it first. They have to want to change. We often say, like, you have to meet people where they are. You can't over positive somebody to get them to change. It doesn't work. Like if you go to, I always think about it, if you go to a little kid, I think there's a lot of psychology that you learn from dealing with little kids because little kids are just pure in their responses, right? If I go to meet somebody's little kid and I get down and I'm like, hey, how are you? I'm so excited to meet you. You're so cute. Look at you. You know, like that. They are gonna like kids will hide, like a lot of them. I mean, there's a few that are so precocious, they're like, yes, you are right, I am awesome. But most kids are gonna hide like behind mom and go like, I don't know what you're doing right now. And the reason is because they're coming in quiet and shy and you're coming in really hard. And if you are coming in with too much contrast for where people are at, they're going to resist you. We as humans are just like that. If I come in, I'm really mad about the situation, and you come in super positive about the situation, it's going to be hard for us to connect. So I think also going back to like, what's the conversation look like? Diana, I loved what you said. You sprinkled in some empathy into it. I was talking to a client of ours had to fire an employee, and it was an employee that we had worked with quite a bit. And the employee was really, really mad and upset and super toxic, had been toxic inside the team, was super upset about it afterwards, and asked to meet with me after she was fired. And we talked to our client, and a lot of times we don't do that. Most of the time we don't do that. But in this case, the owner said, yeah, I think it actually, go ahead, go meet with that person. What are you going to, don't make any promises. And they had a lot of trust in us, which I really appreciated. And so I went into it realizing like, look, I can't fix it. We're not going to undo the firing. We're not going to bring them back in. So then with all of those tools taken off of my plate, all out of my toolbox, there we go. All I could do was just listen to the person. And so she told me all the things that she was really frustrated with and all the things. And I found myself just saying to her, and I'm like, and that's not what you expected. That's not what you signed up for when you joined the company. And she looked at me for a second, and just like you could see like the stress lift off. You could see like she just took a breath and just went, that's exactly right. That's not what I expected. You're exactly right. And it took the anger away. Like it just took, and it was just me meeting her where she was and just hearing the anger of that expectation and reflecting it back to her of saying she wanted to change it so badly, but there's no changing it. And the way she's mad is because that's not what was supposed to happen. That wasn't the plan. That wasn't anybody's plan, and just reflecting that back. So that empathy goes a really long way of like tell me what's going on. And let me tell you why I'm talking to you about this. It's because you're having this huge negative impact on the rest of the team. I came in to have this meeting with everybody to launch this new thing that we're doing or to talk them up. Or we're launching this new software and I know it's going to be really hard. And you started rolling your eyes and going, oh, great, another software launch is going to be hard. Look, I know it's hard. They know it's hard. You telling everybody that it's going to be really hard is not particularly helpful. The question is going to be like, hey guys, we know this is going to be hard, but we're going to have to just solve these problems and we're going to work through this and it's eventually going to get better. Like, I can't let you lead the team that way. Let's talk about what you're frustrated about. Let's talk about what that is. Let's meet you where you are. Then they're going to make a decision to go one way or the other. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Well, I was going to say, and maybe we can talk about this because I think another piece that is hard to do in this is like, how do you paint a picture of a better future without it feeling like toxic positivity, right? So if we use your example of like, we're implementing a new software, right? I think what a lot of people will do, because it's natural, is you're just going to point out to the team the benefits of why we're doing this. And just if we get there, your lives are going to be so much better once we implement this new software, and you just keep pointing at that and pointing at that. But we also know like, that doesn't always feel super great either, even though we might know logically, like, okay, yeah, my boss is right. Like I can see the end of the rainbow and like that this will help our workflows. But right now, this sucks. This sucks. And like you just continuing to tell me, just hang in there, champ, is not helping me. It's like if you've ever had loss in your life, or you just use a simpler example. You drop your ice cream cone that you're very excited about, and somebody looks at you as like, well, at least you had ice cream once, right? You should be happy that you dropped this because you got at least one lick. And you're like, no, this is terrible. I wanted all of that ice cream. Now I have to go buy it again, right? So what's the line there? Like, how do you help paint a picture of like, this is what it could look like if we could get to this place, and help it maybe inspire that person to say, like, I think there is opportunity here for you to like enjoy your job and become positively influential on the team again without kind of pointing to that toxic positivity.
Yeah, and I liked how you said like the positivity. Also, if you could see all three of us, and I know if you're watching us on YouTube, you only get to see who's speaking, but if you could see all three of us, you would have seen Diana's genuine reaction to dropping the ice cream cone, because Diana was remembering the time we were in Texas and we had a flight delay and everything wasn't going right for that day. So we decided to go out for ice cream to make the team better. And Diana literally dropped her ice cream cone onto the floor. And it was one of the saddest things I've ever seen.
I had also spilled my coffee that day. Do you remember?
Oh,
Like, it was just like the flights were canceled. I was at the airport, then the flight got canceled, then you guys' flight got canceled, and then I
oh.
spilled coffee and I dropped my ice cream, and it was a really sad day.
Diana usually really Diana holds it together, and she held it together. She did not, she was really cool about it. But there was an instantaneous, I've known Diana for a long time, and there was an instantaneous about half second look on her face that was pure pain and sadness when that ice cream cone hit the floor. Because it hit the floor, and I immediately looked at her, and she just had this bad response to all that. But not to sidetrack us on Stephanie, I like that question a lot. I struggle with it too, and it doesn't always have to be like toxic positivity of fighting against something. It could just be even like you've got a really good idea. And I struggle with this a lot. You guys know I struggle with this because I'm an ideator. Stephanie, you're an ideator. You and I are both.
Well, yeah, and that's frankly kind of why I asked this question, because I'm going to be really honest. I don't know that I'm good at that. Like, and I'm very ideator. My top two strengths on Gallup are futuristic and strategic. I naturally very easily think about what could be and how we could get there. And so I'll say I even struggle sometimes not to just be like, no, but look where we're going. And just like, you're going to be great. Look how good this will be.
I can remember when I was at 3M, we had a project to install a new mixer to make adhesives, and we were making a two-part epoxy. Those of you who have ever used like epoxy glues, you know there's two parts to them. And when you mix them together, they form the glue, right? So it's two parts. And so 3M makes those. We were making a mixer to make those. Well, I knew that when we did a mixer of those, you'd have to make part A, and then you have to really clean out the mixer, and then you would make a part B, and then you had to really clean it out, and then you'd make a part A again, then you'd really clean it out, and then make part A. And I always thought that was dumb. I'm like, why don't we have two mixers? There should be two mixers. That's the A mixer, and that's the B mixer. You always have an A and B. You're always making this in pairs, then you don't have to clean it as well in between batches. And I thought that was a brilliant idea. But I know from my career and experience, there are 1,000 ideas that I have had that I thought, these are really good ideas. And I come out too strong. I come out past the team and I'm like, everybody drop what you're doing because I'm about to blow your mind and change your lives. And then you watch everybody look at you with skepticism and drag behind. Stephanie, you're feeling me on this one?
Yeah, I was about to say, like, you come out and you're like, I have solved it for you. And then I was like, you kind of suck, you know? And you're like, I don't see it. I really thought you were going to be as excited about this as I was.
Oh, and that is, I'll tell you, if there's an emotional intelligence, if I have an emotional intelligence weakness, that sounds really weird. Yeah. One of my biggest weaknesses in my emotional intelligence, I'll say it that way, is much better, is when I have an idea that I know is a really good idea and I can't convince anybody else that it's a good idea. I feel rage inside. I'm like, you are confining me as a human being. Like, why are you not following me in all of this?
Yeah, heard. I'm like, fine, then you all go off the cliff over there and die. And I'm going to be over here and you're going to see that this was the right way to go.
And that, I mean, so it's like, it's the seeds of toxicity. But so for years, I saw that as an opportunity. And so near the end of my career at 3M, I had an opportunity. One of my last projects I worked on was they said, we need to build a new mixer. And I really thought about it. I did a good job of taking a moment. It was a higher emotional intelligence moment for me saying, I can see what's going to happen. I'm going to make the suggestion. It's going to get shot down. I'm going to get mad. How could I avoid that? And so what I did was instead, I actually talked to a lot of other people about it. And I said, give me some advice here. Like, how do I bring this up? And the advice I got from a really good friend of mine said, come in soft, just come in quiet. Like, just come in with the idea, like, just put the idea like on the table and just say like, hey, by the way, just wanted to throw this out there. Here's an idea. And so I was talking to the VP who was asking for the project, and I remember the conversation we were putting out there, and he's like, so we're going to buy a mixer, you're going to price and da, 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 da. And I said, by the way, just throw this out there. maybe we should consider putting in 2 mixers. And then I went quiet. And he said, why would we do 2 mixers instead of 1 mixer? And I said, well, we do a part A and part B and cleaning in between hand and all that stuff if we did 2 mixers. And then he was like, well, okay, but I think we just need 1 mixer, is what he said. So I could feel the rage growing inside of me, but I was prepared for it. I knew going into it, like, okay, that's going to be that. So I just let it go. I just let it go. The next day, the VP calls me back and he says, I'm still intrigued about why you said 2 mixers, because it makes sense to me that we would have 2 mixers. He goes, but I don't think why would we spend twice as much? I don't want to spend twice as much on 2 mixers. And I said, oh, but it's not twice as much. And he was like, wait, what? So how much more is it? And so I said, let me work on that. I actually knew the answer, but I said, let me work on that and get back to you, which was actually really smart. So then a couple of days later, I called him. I said, hey, I did the math and it's only like 30% more to get 2 mixers. And he goes, wait, we could double the capacity for 30% more? And I said, yeah, we could. And I said, and I think we could do more than double it because you don't have to clean as hard. I talked to the engineer and I asked, how would you clean it? And the cleaning cycle that normally takes 12 hours or whatever it was will only take us 2 if we keep the same thing. So then what I'm doing is it's like slowly becoming that his idea. Like the VP's like, I like this idea. This is really good. I'm all in on this. I think that's how you have to meet people where they are as you're presenting these ideas. That was a moment where I was successful, but I'm not often successful in it because I get too excited.
Well, but also I will say that I would have felt rage, and I'm not one of those people. I'm not one of you two. I'm not like an ideator, but I would have felt rage in this because that logically makes so much sense that if they didn't follow it, I'd be like, you are, and I would be really mad about it. So
thank you, Diana. That's why we work well together.
it was
Because
a great idea.
You
Great.
recognize my brilliance, and that
Brilliant.
makes us work well together.
Some ideas are brilliant. Yes.
I win on volume. If you work with me long enough, I'll show up sometimes to work and I'm like, guys, nuts and gum, let's mix them together. Like peanuts and gum. Like you get a nutty snack and you get a minty flavor, and you're like, no, Don, I stole that from The Simpsons.
They already made that, and it's called a payday bar, and they're gross.
I am offended. I am offended.
That kills our idea of getting the sponsorship from Payday, I guess. Sorry, Payday people.
Sorry to anybody who loves a payday bar.
Payday. But you're right. It is sort of.
It's peanut gum.
It's
it
a little
sticks
bit.
to your teeth. It's not good. I'm sorry.
So the idea of all of this is like, look, we're impacting each other on a daily basis, whether you mean to or not. Like we're just bouncing off each other. There's stuff that's coming off of us as a contagion, and we're out there bouncing the stuff off of each other. So one, to be aware of that's happening, so that you're aware of how you're impacting other people, and then 2, if you're a manager of a group, how do you deal with a person who is toxic and pushing against the wrong way? And you have to reflect back to them, meet them where they are, reflect back to them how it's impacting the team, and then stop letting it impact the team, one way or the other. The one way is they stop doing it. The other way is they leave the team, which there's only 2 options for that. They decide to do it, or you decide to promote them to the next opportunity inside of another company. Also, don't use that line I just said. Somebody listening to a podcast earlier said, hey, I used your line and I fired somebody by saying that. Don't do that. That's not a good way to fire somebody. That's funny. We can laugh about it. I promote you to your next job in another organization. Don't do that when firing somebody. That's cruel and mean. Don't do that. Yes, that really happened.
Agreed.
I see our team reacting to that. I don't know if I've talked about that, but yeah, somebody came to me during a conference and said, hey, I used your line when I fired somebody. I was like, how did that go? And they're like, it was awful. I'm like, yeah, that's not a line to use. But also then, if you're trying to think about how do I positively impact the team, the answer is don't run way ahead of them. You can run way ahead of them on the negative side. You can run way ahead of them on the positive side. It's kind of just be out there and just float. Do ripples, right? Don't be. What was the term in the article you said, the Harry Potter term, Diana, that you said? Don't be this person.
Professional dementor. Don't suck the life out of it,
If you're a Harry Potter fan, the Dementors are the creatures that come and they suck like your happiness and joy out of you, right?
Yeah.
And there's a spell that you can cast to get rid of them, and I think it's expect more petroleum, right? Isn't that? I nailed it.
We tried to tell you this before the podcast, so you wouldn't say that, and we were ineffective.
All of the Harry Potter fans are going to come after us. I'm going to have so many emails about this.
Oh man,
I'm sorry.
And to your point, Don, I also want to add, like, tell people what you're thinking, good and bad. right? If you're thinking good things about someone, tell them. That spreads this emotional contagion. If bad things are going on, talk about it. That decreases that bad emotional contagion. And so I think if you're just like transparent and talking about things and open to what is going on around you, it diminishes all of the pain that goes along with this bad emotional contagion.
I agree. If we can have just more conversations, then we're probably going to have fewer like confrontations, because I feel like usually confrontations are happening because we've probably not said the things that we should have said. We didn't give the feedback when it happened. We didn't just go to somebody and be like, are you all right? Is everything going okay? Like, I saw you react differently to that today, or I noticed your body language. Like, are you okay? What can I help you with? And we let those things go unnoticed because we feel like before we talk to someone about something, we've got to have seen it happen so many times. We have to have patterns and trends and all of those things. And I think we just kind of need to reject that of like, again, don't pounce on everything. But if you can approach someone with kindness and grace to say, we all do this, then it's like, hey, like, that meeting didn't go super well, did it? Can we talk about it?
Yeah, and especially if you set that up as somebody you work closely. Diana and I have been talking about this a lot going into this year. As we said, we work very, very closely together, but we said like to take it up another notch. Like if I see Diana do something that I don't understand in a meeting and she reacts away, which could be super positive or negative or whatever, but I don't understand it, I'm very likely to reach out to Diana and say, like, tell me a little more about what you were thinking in that meeting, or I saw this reaction.
Almost instantly, right? Like as soon as that meeting's over, we're going to talk about it.
We're on the chat channel back and forth with each other, going like, hey, in this meeting, I saw this response, and this goes both directions right now. And I think it's been good, Diana. It's kind of weird in terms of like all the going back and forth all the time. But I mean, we're not doing it every day, like every meeting and saying like, oh, I triaged this meeting. Why did you make fun of my Harry Potter spell or something like that? But it's just, it's more like when if we don't understand
like,
it.
Oh, that was a chink in your emotional armor, right? I saw something, you said something. I don't know where that came from. I don't know how you got there. I don't understand it. It's been good. I love being like, you're seeing something I'm not seeing, or you're here, like, I don't get it. Your brain thinks differently than mine. Help me get there. Those things are all really helpful.
Yeah, and those are the people who you can be best partners with at work, or the people that think very differently from you. And Diana and I think very, very differently from each other. And so when we're saying, and you're right, a lot of times it's because we miss something, or sometimes we're just coming at it from two different perspectives, from the different sides of that. But it doesn't bring you. Sometimes people think that's conflict. But we started using the word like confrontation versus conflict. Like conflict builds relationships.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to be a confrontation where we're going to fight over it. A conflict could just be like, hey, I saw this and you and I aren't exactly on the same page here. Let's talk through it. Tell me more about what you're thinking. What's your approach? Why are you doing this? What does that look like?
And I think more people need to do more of that. There needs to be lots more of that.
Yeah, it's easier not to do it. It's easier not to do it short term.
Way
it's easier not to do it. It's an investment really into like a work relationship to understand and build, but it builds trust. It builds trust. And then you get to use all the strengths of the people on your team. And then you don't get I told you so. I knew that was going to happen. And then you get why didn't you say something? And you're like, well, I kind of did. And you just misinterpreted it in the meeting of me being negative or me trying to shoot down an idea. And
yeah.
Right. Yeah, that. And then, totally. That opens that up.
Yeah.
Well, I love this topic, Diana. This was a good one. I'm glad you brought this to the team here.
I wish I could cite where I heard it, but I cannot. I don't know. My brain is old now and it doesn't hold information like it used to. I can't do it. But it was really such a good phrase that I was like, yeah, we have to talk about this.
No, it's good. It's good stuff. I think when we talk about these concepts that come up, we want to make it really applicable for all of you who are listening or watching us, because we want you to be able to take it back. And that's the thing we get most excited about, is hearing the stories that you all have of saying, hey, I heard this. It helped me to address something. So whether you're the person who needs to check your emotions a little bit and make sure that you're emoting the right way and impacting the team the right way, or you're trying to help manage other people's emotions at work, which are both emotional intelligence things, or you're just trying to open up communication on your team and try to figure out how you can get to the next level as a team, I think there's a little bit of something for everybody on this episode. I think it's good. It was a good reminder for me too. I like when you do these episodes and I'm like, okay, I think this, we talked about if we never put these podcast episodes out, it would still be a great exercise for our team, right?
True.
It just helps, keeps us sharp, keeps us talking, keeps us on the edge, which is really
It's
awesome.
to see each other's perspectives. That's kind of cool. You guys think differently every time. So yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So thanks for joining us as always, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the People Centric Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.